lived in Rockaway. I lived in Rockaway Beach, lived with my grandparents. My grandfather owned a house. It was a three-story house. And actually, he rented out the bottom floor to a family. So we were on the second floor. It was a pretty big second floor. And then I remember now, he rented the third floor to a family. So my grandparents and my parents and I were on the second floor.
Okay.
Bedrooms far apart from one another, that kind of thing. And we had a terrace, a porch. It was really a porch. And we would eat out there in the summertime. And there was always seltzer on the table. My grandfather adored seltzer. So we would have boxes of seltzer on the porch. And from the porch, you could see a little sliver of the Atlantic Ocean because we were about the fifth house away from the beach. And then there was a roadway, and then came the boardwalk and the ocean. So we were pretty close.
So tell me about your friends when you were in Rockaway.
I had, I believe I told you once, a black girl, something Addie Mae Powell, something like that, who went to school, walked to school with me because it seems that the boys were always hitting me, like little boys do. I don't know what goes into those little kids. And so I was afraid to walk to school alone, and I think her name was Hattie Mae, said that she would protect me.
Yeah.
And she was big. So that was one friend. And I don't remember any other friends because I did have cousins who came to visit. Across the street from me, there was one cousin, and two houses down were the grandparents of other cousins. And that's what I remember about those years in Rockaway, my cousins coming to visit, playing with them, having a lot of fun.
Oh, and the boys that would hit you, do you think they were doing it to get your attention or they were just mean to all the kids?
Little boys are
Yeah.
always doing that to little girls for some reason. I don't know. All I know is that I was afraid to walk to school by myself. So I had that protector.
So you had an enforcer,
I
but
had somebody to protect me. I think that little boys do that. It's just annoying. Cousins came over. We loved just jumping from couch to chair, from chair to chair. My grandparents never said anything. It was in like a communal room. Then we also played games like Chinese checkers and cards, go fish. I think it might have been shoots and ladders, but I don't know. I can't remember whether that was me or whether it was my kids that had the shoots and ladders. We Monopoly. We played board games, and when the weather was good, we were outside jumping rope. Double Dutch was fun to do. Hopscotch was great. That was great, and just walking around, just
yeah.
walking. And when the weather was good, of course, then we were on the beach. We were in the water, and I think at one point my mother, I remember her telling me, "Don't go out so far. Don't go out so far." And of course I did because when the water was calm, it was just beautiful to keep going out, which was crazy now. And she always wanted me to be covered, not because of skin cancer, we didn't know about that in those days, but she was afraid that I would get freckles. And she didn't think that was going to be very attractive for me, for anybody to marry me if I had freckles. So yeah, and we had a lot of fun with
Yeah.
the cousins. Yeah. So when I was about 8, we moved to Jackson Heights without my grandparents. We were on our own then, and then I had several friends. I had Sheila Carrig, I had Nina Scardino, and all of us hung out together. We I walked to school. I went to PS1, and I just walked down to the corner. There was a big lot, then crossed the street. Chesler's candy store was. Walked up the hill. There was a drugstore on the corner. Walked 1 block more, and there was the school, PS1. And it was a great school. It was terrific. It was New York City schools in those days were really good. And my favorite teacher was Miss Ross, and my least favorite teacher was Mrs. Linebeck, and they were sisters-in-law.
Oh, wow.
And Miss Ross had something called choral speaking. I don't know if that's done nowadays. We would recite poems or songs, but we didn't sing them. It was speaking, and it was more fun. It was just a wonderful thing to do. And then those were the war years, World War II, and we were very much aware of the war, very much aware of it. There was one teacher who would write on the board every day we came in how many more of our soldiers had died. We would make little quilts and packages for the boys overseas. We had air raid drills in school to hide underneath the desks. Also, there were air raids out, make-believe air raids outside. The man above us, Jack Perlman, he was an air raid warden, and the air raid siren would sound, and Jack and other men, also men, not women, would go make sure that all the lights were out in the houses. And don't forget, we were very close to LaGuardia Airport. And the kids, we were really afraid that the Germans were going to come and bomb the airport, and we would be there. So it was a scary time as well. And I remember the two little boys upstairs. Jack Perlman was the father, Henry and Alan, I believe their names were. And I would go up, they were little kids, and I would go up and I would stay with them. We would just hang out together because we were all afraid. Even though my parents were downstairs, I think we felt comfortable with one another. And also, when the lights, they had these lights on the boardwalk. That was, wait a minute, that was another time. Sorry, I'm jumping.
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm jumping back because I just remember that when I was in Rockaway, the war had started at that point. And I remember that they had to black out these street lights that were facing the water so that the submarines could not see us or something like that. No, so I'm back in Jackson Heights, yeah. And so I really lived in Jackson Heights until I went to college.
And I want to back up just a little bit because your grandparents back in Rockaway, what were their names? And these were Eve's parents, correct?
That's Eve's parents, right. Kirschenbaum. Louis and Sarah Kirschenbaum.
And
Louis came from Poland/Austria. They didn't really know that exactly what country had invaded what country. So in other words, I believe, let's say they spoke Polish. My grandparents did speak Polish, but they did have German names. Whenever a new horse came, they would give it to Louis because he was more like a horse whisperer. He loved the horses, and they obviously loved him. But these were trying times. This was, I guess it must have been World War I. And my grandfather knew that if he were called to the office, it would be only for one reason, and that would be to go into the army, couldn't go home, couldn't tell your parents or anything, go into the army, and when you were Jewish, they would just put you in the front lines, and you were fodder. You were going to be killed. No, this is not the Holocaust, mind you.
right.
This is just a war. So my grandfather was called to the office. And he said to the owner, I would like to be excused. I want to go to the bathroom, which was an outhouse. And they said, okay. So he went into the outhouse and he escaped through the toilet. And when you are desperate, this is what you do. He had planned this whole thing. And he knew he had to change his clothes, he had everything. He had somehow he got on a ship. That part I don't know. And he came to the United States, came to New York. And my grandmother had come over before or around the same time. They did not know each other, but they met up in downtown New York. And I believe the story is that my grandmother and her sisters had a rooming house, and my grandfather was the star boarder, and he fell in love with my grandmother, who was a couple of years older than he. But my grandmother she was a very good cook, and when she was little, she worked with her mother for a wealthy family in Poland, Austria, and she knew the proper way to sit at the table, the forks, the knives. She was very observant, even though she was very little. And my grandfather had a terrible habit of after he ate a burping. He couldn't help himself. He just did. And she thought that was the classe, as we say. And she told him, stop. And this is when they were engaged.
Yeah.
And he couldn't stop. It just came out. So she broke the engagement, gave him back his ring, probably a little thing, gave him back his ring, and I guess she then did forgive him after all. Because they did get married. They got married, and my grandfather, since all he knew was horses, he bought one nag, I guess, and then he took people on rides, like a horse and buggy. And they lived in Avenue A. The children started coming, and where they lived above the stable. And my mother would always say, the smell of manure, and all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, so my grandfather did that for a while. He was a very good horseman. And then when automobiles came in vogue, this was passé. It was no longer a viable business to have a horse and buggy. So he saved money and he bought a taxi cab. And then that was profitable, and he bought another taxi cab. And I don't think there were that many more that he bought, but at that time, he had more taxi cabs than anybody else. It might have been only 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Kind of leader of the thing. And then they moved to Harlem. They moved uptown. And my grandfather brought his family over from Europe. This is all before the Holocaust.
What year did they move up to Harlem?
That I don't know. I really don't know. But it was when a lot of Jewish people were moving uptown. The big wave of immigrants from Europe, Jews, Italians, Irish, and if they settled in New York, they usually settled downtown. Delancey Street, Livingston Street, Orchard Street, all those. My grandparents didn't because they had the horse, so they had to go a little bit further away, like this Avenue A. And then the Jews started, I don't know when the Irish and the Italians started going, but there was a wave of Jews that started moving uptown, away from the very crowded ghetto type of things, moving into apartment houses. Some moved into very fancy houses, but that was not what my grandparents wanted. They just wanted fun.
Yeah. So they went from Harlem down to Rockaway Beach.
Yes, that's right.
Now, How much do you know about Reuben's
I
family?
do know that Reuben, who's my father, he lost his father when he was 12 years old. His father was a glazier, somebody that with glass.
Yeah.
And his mother was left at a very young age with, let's see, I'll tell you how many children there were. Sammy, and Ruby, Dottie, Nettie, Fanny, with 6 children. And with really no means of support. They were very poor. And there was a wonderful man. His first name was Lucas. I don't remember what his last name was, who helped out with money and with care for the children. And my father had to go to work. He couldn't, I don't think he finished high school. And Dottie and all the others, they were very pretty. The girls were very pretty. And they would go outside and they would dance. They were good dancers. And then people would throw money in. They were really poor.
And where was this?
They moved up to Harlem too. I don't know where they were before then, but they were not that close for proximity. But somehow Ruby became friendly, my father became friendly with Henry, which was my mother's brother. I don't know whether they went to the same school together or what, but they palled around together. And that's how Reuben met Eva, my mother, through Henry. That's how they. So anyhow, so that's on my father's side. So he had the siblings, 5 other siblings. He had 5 other. He had a brother, and then that was Sammy, and then there was Dottie, and then there was Ida, Fanny, Nettie. They lived in the Bronx. So Sammy, Nettie, Fanny, and Bubby. Bubby was the mother. They lived in the Bronx. And then Ida lived in New Jersey.
Okay.
This is when they got married.
Yeah.
Okay? We're skipping because
That's
I
okay.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know really what happened when they were younger. I just know that they had. So now you had. I don't know what Sammy did. I really never knew. Sammy was to himself a lot. That was a brother. And my father and Sammy were not close. Then there was Dottie, who was known for her molds. She just made wonderful Jello molds, and she was.
Interesting.
Yeah, she was. Vicky, your wife, laughs all the time about Dottie with her molds.
No.
And then there was Nettie and Fanny. Now they stuck together. They never married. Dottie married. Sammy did not marry. Dottie married, and Ida married. Okay, so Nettie worked in a bank way downtown, and Dottie's husband would drive Nettie and Fanny, who worked downtown also, every single day, to drive them downtown because Ben, his name was Ben, he had a store, an electrical store way downtown the Battery, and Nettie worked in a bank. And Nettie was, as I said, a very smart lady, and there was a young boy who was learning the business, the banking business, and he was really cleaning up the place, but he wanted to be a banker, but he didn't have any money to go to college. He just didn't have any money, and Nettie thought that this boy really had promise, so she paid for him. He went to a city college, but she had to pay for the books, and you had to pay for things, even if it's a city college.
Yeah.
She paid his entire way, 4 years, whatever he needed. She paid for it because he was so decent and so smart. I tell you, what happened after that is that he worked himself up, and he became president of that bank, the bank downtown. And when Nettie, then we're going back a year, then we're fast forward a few years, and Nettie got older, and she got sick. She couldn't work anymore. He paid her full salary for all she couldn't come in, she was sick for years. He paid her salary. That wonderful.
That is such a great story.
Wonderful. Nettie, the story goes that Nettie never married, but she had fallen in love with a young Irish boy who was married, and they were in love. And yet, to marry out of your religion in those days was really tough. But the fact he was married anyhow, yeah. But that I think that was the love of her life. She never married.
So it really was forbidden to marry out of your religion.
It was. People did it, but in those days, that was really a bad situation. Really, no. She didn't want to go against her mother. But anyhow, he was married. And he couldn't get a divorce. He was Catholic.
So when you were a little girl, what did you want to do when you got older?
I always dreamt that I'd love to be a ballerina, or I'd love to be an artist, some sort of painter. But I took ballet lessons, actually, and I took tap dancing lessons. Now, I would say that I would have liked to have been on the stage doing some sort of acting or dancing or singing. I don't have a voice, cannot sing, and cannot act, and cannot dance.
But back then, did you do recitals? Did you perform in any school plays?
Did. When I was older, meaning, let's see, after I had class, I was in amateur plays, and they were local. They were just local, and I loved it. That was fun. But of course, I always got very nervous when I had to say something. I was better off not just sitting there on the stage, not saying anything, because I really had stage fright. So that basically is what I wanted to do. And then basically, I really wanted to get married. I didn't have a burning desire, not a real burning desire to be a lawyer or a doctor or something. Yeah. No, that was not.
So continue that story about when Klaus came to see you.
And I was in a play. Yeah. I was in a play, and I asked him if he'd like to come and see the play that I'm in, and he said yes. So we came to see it, and I had the part. I think I was in. I don't remember the name of the play. I don't remember. I just remember that I played the part of a mother who was in an insane asylum, and I had a baby, and I was crying over the baby, and I thought I was wonderful. And anyhow, at the end, Klaus came backstage, and I said, "What did you think? What did you think?" He hardly knew me, mind you. You know what he said to me? He said, "You were awful." And I said, and I looked at him. I tell you, I think that maybe that's when I started falling in love with him. Because at least he told me the truth. In those days, the girls went out all the time. I always went out with boys. And they were always so false. They would always say things that I knew that they were full of baloney, full of malarkey, as Joe Biden says. But this guy, he told the truth.
Yeah.
He was real. He was real. So while he said that, I'll never forget it. And I'll never forget quite a few other things that guy has said to me, which I don't think I'm going to repeat here. No, I think. And he was true blue. He was, I'll tell you, no, he wasn't false. He was right on all the time.
So when you were a little girl, do you remember going to the movies? Did you listen to the radio?
I did, for sure, listen to the radio. For sure. We didn't have television, and it was, especially during the war years, I listened to all of the battles, and I said before the Battle of Anzio, the Battle of Casino, the Battle of, just all the battles. I was very well versed. I was very well versed in geography, in everything that was happening in Europe around me. I was curious. I was a very good student. I really I read a lot. I loved Hemingway. As a matter of fact, one of the things that my friends and I did is that after we would read a book, we would act out the parts in the book. In those days, I still wanted to, thought the acting in me was laying dormant there. And as I say, I listened to the radio, listened to the music, all the songs that were being sung. Tommy Dorsey, the Andrews Sisters, Arnie Shaw had a crush on Harry James. I don't know why. Looking at him now, I don't know why I like that guy so much. He was married to Betty Grable. I must have had a thing for trumpeters. I don't know.
How about young Frank when he first?
Frank, you know what? There was a thing. We were divided. Okay, there were some of us who really liked Bing Crosby. There were others that really liked Frank Sinatra. I really, even though Frankie was probably a better singer, but I decided that I would like Bing Crosby better. So I was on the Bing Crosby side, not on the Frank Sinatra. Yeah, you wouldn't find me screaming and yelling for Frankie. Ah! I felt I was more sedate than that. I was like those other people there, screaming and yelling. No, I was for Bing Crosby. He was my guy.
What was your favorite holiday when you were a little girl?
Oh, my goodness. Probably Christmas.
Did you guys celebrate Christmas?
We never celebrated Christmas, but the people upstairs when we lived in Jackson Heights.
Yeah.
Jack was Jewish and his wife was not. She was Protestant. She was Marie. They were just great people. And then there was, I think it was Harry and Alan. I think those were the names of the two boys that I would go up when the sirens was down. They had a Christmas tree because Jack was not a religious Jew at all.
Yeah.
But Marie was from Pennsylvania, grew up on a farm. She was Christian, and they had a Christmas tree. And I'm telling you, that was really such fun because we would put presents. My parents would put presents for me underneath the Christmas tree, so that in the morning they would knock down, bang on the floor because it was two families.
Yeah.
And I would run upstairs, and I loved it. So that was really my favorite.
So your parents would buy gifts to put under that tree.
Yeah, to put under the tree upstairs because we would not have a tree.
Do you remember what gifts you would?
Remember that one the Encyclopedia Britannica. We celebrated all of the Jewish. Let me see. I didn't remember getting gifts for Hanukkah. You remember that? Passover was always at Bubby's house. Bubby meaning my father's mother.
Uh-huh.
And in the Bronx. And we would go up there. And by this time, Dottie and Ida, they had a family and they had their children. So the children, Cookie and Bobby and everybody, all come to have Passover. When I say, let's say it started maybe at 6 o'clock or sundown, I think it lasted until midnight.
Wow.
It was so long. And the kids, who were kids growing up, we started at one point just giggling. And we giggled for about 2 hours. Because we were so tired.
Yeah.
But the food was good.
And what made it so long?
Because they read the entire Bible from cover to cover.
Oh, wow.
I think they read the Bible also. And whatever they did, it took forever. And then the first course, would be like soup. Okay. Then, everything that took a while. And then, of course, then you had the prayers. Right. Then after that came the filter fish. Okay, then you had the prayers. And on. But it was nice because it was family.
Yeah.
It was just fine.
Yeah.
Really was. And so that was Passover and Hanukkah. We really didn't celebrate any of the other holidays.
Mm-hmm.
It was, no, I think that was just about it. I'll say the Passover only had matzahs we cannot eat bread. And my mother would make a matzah sandwich for me because when I went to school, when I was at PS1, I would come home for lunch.
Yeah.
So my mother would dampen, put some water on the matzah, and put whatever it was, egg salad, tuna fish, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I eat it. It really wasn't good. But you know what? When you're hungry, you eat.
Yeah.